Good favor.
And we are live. Hey, Concrete. Hey, Mr. Alan Roger Currie.
Hello,
Hey,
ladies.
Danny girl.
How are you guys?
And as I'm wonderful. To our guest, how are you, Mr. Curry?
Oh, I'm just fine. I'm just trying to stay safe and healthy during this ever so challenging pandemic. A favor.
Absolutely. Trying to do pretty much the same thing.
Hey, Okay.
Can you hear me, Danny?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. I was gonna say I tried to sit in the space where I wouldn't have any system issues or anything wrong with my phone or glitches. So I'm sitting and hopefully all is well regarding my sound. But for those of you who have already joined us in the chat, hello, hello, hello. As you all can see by the thumbnail, we're going to be having a candid conversation with popular author and dating coach who has written and published a host of books, including the popular Mode 1, Mr. Alan Roger Currie. He's known to his male fathers as the godfather of direct game, and to his female followers, as the king of verbal seduction. So first off, we want to thank you for agreeing to do this interview, and also thank you for the shout outs that you've given us on your channel too.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you. So we're going to dive right on in. Danny, do you want to go first, and then just kind of you go, and then I'll go after you, and go in sequential order, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I can go first and
go ahead.
It's like that. So, Mr. Currie, really, really great to have you here. So let's just dive right on into it.
let's get right on in. Let's hit the ground running.
Yes. So you've dated a lot of women, right?
Right.
You understand the dark nature of women. You've wrote a few books on women's dark nature, men being able to say whatever they want. What would make you get to a point of settling down after all of this time? Like, what would make you settle down? We understand
you ain't wasting no time, Danny. Go ahead.
No, because honey, I'm like, we got a lot to cover, honey. We got a lot to cover.
Well, number one, that's a good question, because it's a question that's been posed to me quite frequently, and I just simply say about women's nature, I understand it, I accept it, and you just got to get to a point where you can lean on your gut instinct and your intuition about the type of person you're dealing with in a relationship. And as far as my fiance, I feel like she's a top quality woman. To date, she hasn't given me any sign that I would have any regrets in the near future. She comes from, she has an extremely close relationship with her father, which is something that's important to me. And as well as she has a great relationship with her mother. So the biggest thing for me, I've always wanted a son or daughter. And my college sweetheart, the one other woman who was pregnant with my baby, in addition to my fiance, was my college sweetheart, but she didn't want to drop out of school, so she chose to have an abortion. And ever since then, I've wanted a son or daughter. And I told friends for a few years now that if I met the right woman that I felt like I could raise children with, then I would go ahead and more than likely tie that knot. And the woman I'm currently engaged to, she's 5 months pregnant with my son. Matter of fact, interesting enough, we find out tomorrow the gender. So
wow.
Tomorrow, if it's going to be a son or a daughter. And
that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. And, but yeah, contrary to popular belief among some men who follow me, like some men particularly in relation to one of my 4 books called The Beta Male Revolution, they felt like I have maintained a lot of anti-marriage sentiments. But the truth of the matter is I've never been anti-marriage. I've just always pointed out the strengths and weaknesses of marriage. And I pointed out that for some guys, there's certain type of guys that I do think should be hesitant to get married, should be reluctant to get married. If I had to highlight one, would be a guy who's just kind of a weak type of dude, a guy whose wife is going to end up browbeating him, bullying him, just fully taking advantage of him. That type of guy who has weak backbone, he should think twice about marriage, because more than likely he's just going to be exploited. But if you're a man like myself with strong backbone, strong character, like my fiance is extraordinarily feminine and extraordinarily submissive, which are 2 characteristics I look for in women. And so, you know, she knows her role in this relationship and I know mine, and we get along famously.
Well, she's very beautiful, might I add.
Thank
Congratulations on your engagement as well as your baby. That's so exciting. I do have a piggyback question though.
Go ahead.
So your reason to marry at this point has nothing to do with your age, like maybe feeling like you're aging out of the game a little bit?
No. And again, that's a good question too, because I know a lot of men have proceeded like, oh, he's getting old, and you know. No, if I would have found a woman 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that I felt like was worthy of being the mother to my children, then I would have got married 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now, in my 20s and 30s, one of the reasons I never attempted to get married was because financially I was not in a position to get married. I've admitted many times on my channel, for most of my 20s and the vast majority of my 30s, I was erratically employed and broke. Well, I wouldn't say flat broke, but I was financially struggling. I didn't really become what I would call a financially self-sufficient adult man until about my early to mid 40s. So yeah, but no, age is a very secondary factor. It was about, for me, finding a woman who was worthy of being the mother to my children.
Interesting. Danny, you have a follow-up question?
Actually, I did. You said that certain men shouldn't get married, especially if the woman is going to be the type to bully them, to make them feel some type of way. And so my question to you would be, do you ever hear how men say that women will flip the switch on them, and there'll be one thing one day, and as soon as they get married, as soon as it's official, they turn into different people? Did you have a certain way to vet your fiance, and would you have any advice on vetting to other men?
Well, yeah, I talk about that very concept in my own book, The Beta Male Revolution. There's a chapter I talk about. It's entitled the marital bait and switch. So that does happen. Matter of fact, when I had my Blog Talk radio show, I remember I interviewed this Caucasian gentleman from the East Coast who talked about that. He was with a woman, and he said while he was dating her and while he was engaged to her, she was just easy to get along with, very sweet. And then he said within a year or two after they got married, she turned into the bitch from hell. And he said the last 5 years of his 10-year marriage to her was a sexless marriage. So, yeah, I give guys, when I consult with them, different little both overt behavioral trait signs as well as more subtle behavioral trait signs to look out for, where they can do a good job of predicting if a woman's going to do a bait and switch. And here's one thing I just say in general is that one thing men and women need to stop doing when they date is trying to leave each other with nothing but favorable impressions of themselves.
Mm.
That's on paper, that sounds like a good thing, but in the long run, that's not a good thing. You need to be like my first book, Mo 1, is predominantly about being a real, authentic person.
Mm.
You need to be real, and you need to force yourself to be as real and authentic as possible yourself, number one. And number two, you need to ask questions to your partner that provokes them. Because there's certain questions you can ask people that will provoke them to reveal who they really are. But if you just full of fluff talk, talking about how great the weather is and how great your grandma was, how much you love your sister's dog, that's not helping anybody.
I actually agree with that. I think that most people send their representatives,
Exactly.
and generally for the first maybe 6 months to a year that you're dating, you're dealing with the representative or the image that the person that you're dating wants you to see. I do have a question though. Do you think that marriage will somehow affect your reputation as a dating coach and as the king of seduction? Will that at all, do you feel like that might impact your image?
Kind of half yes, half no. As far as negatively affecting my credibility as a dating coach, I don't believe it will. And more emphatically, I don't think it should, because the only time I think me getting married should have a negative effect on my reputation as a dating coach is if all of my advice was about remaining single. Then quite naturally, me being married would be a contradiction to that.
Absolutely.
But there's in none of my books do I promote the idea of remaining a confirmed bachelor indefinitely. I don't promote that in Mo 1. I don't promote that in Who Said Again. I don't promote that in The Possibility of Sex and Contrary to Popular Belief. I don't promote that in The Beta Male Revolution, which is probably the number one book that most people misinterpreted as me promoting that. But I've never told men that they should be a confirmed bachelor. Now, if they want to be, I at the same time, let me make it clear, I'm not criticizing guys who do choose to be a confirmed bachelor from now until the day they're 6 feet under. If that's their choice, so be it. But I've never specifically encouraged any man to do that. So in that respect, I don't think that me being engaged now or me getting married in the future should in any way negatively impact my credibility as a dating coach. Now, as far as under my nickname, the king of verbal seduction, yeah, marriage is going to change that, because that is, for the most part, related to me being a prolific womanizer. So, I mean,
Well, I had a question to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you in a polyamorous relationship?
Yes.
Okay, because I noticed the last
Interesting.
time you were on our show, Mr. J had brought up polyamory, or I don't know if she brought it up, but it was spoken about. But I noticed you kind of went a little hard about it, and so I was like, well, maybe he's in a polyamorous relationship. Being that you're in a polyamorous relationship, do you think that that would actually give you more clout as a dating coach and as a verbal seduction?
It could. Yeah. Here's my thing, and I do say this in my book, The Beta Male Revolution. I think there's generally two types of monogamy you can be involved in, and that's obligatory monogamy and voluntary monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple difference between the two is, if you're married or in a relationship and the only motivating factor for why you're monogamous is because you feel like you're supposed to be or you have to be, then that's obligatory monogamy. Whereas polyamory doesn't necessarily mean you're automatically going to be fucking other people other than your partner or spouse. But what it means is that during those moments when you are monogamous, like up to this point, me and my fiance, we have been monogamous to each other. But it's totally by our choice. It's a genuine desire to be. It's not like I'm telling her, hey, you better not cheat on me. You better ever not, or you know, I'll do this or that, and vice versa. We don't have any of that. It's just that we both choose. But yeah, I mean, the thing I had a problem with what Miss J said, among other things, was she made one comment where she said, either said or implied, that the only way a marriage can be healthy is if it's strictly monogamous. And I know for a fact that that's just simply not the truth.
Well, I have a question for you. I must admit that from what I knew of you, I knew that, of course, that you're an author, and I knew that you authored Mode 1 and that you are also a dating coach. I've actually heard you on some different platforms in the manosphere, and it was quite evident that you're articulate, very intelligent man. From what I was actually just pretty surprised to hear that. I think it was on our last panel the panel, I think the panel that we were just referring to, when you said that when you are in a monogamous relationship, that you are actually committed, and that I don't know if you said like you've never cheated, or you don't generally cheat if you are, if you've decided to be in a monogamous relationship with somebody. And I just found that to be quite interesting and surprising.
Yeah, a lot of people think if a guy has been a prolific womanizer for a number of years, that it's inevitable that he's done a high degree of cheating with his girlfriends and significant others. Whereas no, yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say I've never ever cheated. I actually have. When I was between, I think, roughly 17 and 20. Yeah, the age of 17 and 20, there was like at least 2, if not 3 women that I dated that I did cheat on at least once. But I would say starting with the age of 21 to now, and I'm now 57. So you're talking about 36 years. For the last 36 years, I've never ever cheated on a woman. If I was in a serious relationship with a woman, I told her at the outset of the relationship, I would say, hey, I care for you, I love you, whatever, but I'm gonna let you know up front. If I cross paths with a woman that really gets me horny to the point where I want to exchange orgasms with her, there's a greater than 50% chance I'm going to exchange orgasms with her. And I would give the woman a choice. I would basically say, if you think this is a scenario that you can't handle, let me know, and we'll go our separate ways right now. But I think I mentioned it when I was on your stream. I said, because one other guy that was on was saying that sometimes you can propose things to women thinking that they're going to have a very negative reaction to it and to it, only to be pleasantly surprised that they co-sign with it. That's been my experience a lot of times. Like, there was a lot of women that I would tell them basically, I'm not going to be faithfully monogamous to you. I'm going to fuck other women. And I was expecting those women to say, oh, well, then hell no, then I ain't dating you then. But a lot of those women would say, oh, I'm cool with that. I don't care.
Have you ever had a woman cheat on you before?
Knowingly, no. Where if you're talking about cheating on me to the point where I was aware of it, I knew about it. No. If I had my best suspicions, yeah, there's probably at least 1, if not 2 exes of mine that I would suspect that they probably stepped out on me before when I was younger. But I've never had a woman like come to me and confess, Alan, I cheated on you. Or one of my friends or her friends came to me and said, hey, Alan, your girlfriend is cheating on you with so-and-so. I've never had that situation.
If you suspected cheating right now, would you go through a woman's phone?
Oh, I don't do that shit.
And I hate to kind of move past the point in which what the conversation has grown to, but I did want to ask about something. Um, I know that you've done very few interviews, and that there's this notion that you typically don't like to be interviewed by women. Can you confirm or deny that, and kind of expound upon maybe where that came from?
Yeah, that's confirmed. Matter of fact, I mentioned that in me promoting this interview to some of my followers, is that yeah, this is only my second one-on-one interview I've had since I've been on YouTube with a female host. The first was I don't know if you guys are familiar with a sister named Irene Yvette.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, I gave her an interview in mid-January of last year. And then one other interview, but it wasn't one-on-one, was a woman who goes by the name Nicole Michelle, Inner Beauty.
Mhm.
But that was more of a group. It was like me and like 3 other women and 1 or 2 other guys. But no, it's not, I don't want to generalize all women, but in the past, like when I was on Blog Talk Radio, I used to get invited by some of the other Blog Talk Radio hosts who happened to be women for interviews. And I had a few that went well, but I'll say this, for every one that went well, there was probably 2 that I ended up being displeased with. One off the top of my head would be, I'm pretty provocative and explicit conversationalist. So one would have to do with language. I can't deal with a woman that's a verbal prude. So now if you say that up front, then I have the choice to either agree to the interview or not. So I don't have a problem if a woman says from the outset, hey, Alan, I want to interview you, but I got to let you know, I don't want you to use any profanity or any X-rated language. Then I'm fine with that. If I accept the interview, then I'm going to modify my language. But I had instances where a woman would invite me to an interview and she wouldn't put any kind of, guidelines about language. And then when I would start getting real explicit, she would start using this self-righteous, judgmental type admonishments towards me. And I'd be like, oh, fuck no. So that's one thing, language.
Yeah.
Another thing would be along the same lines, just general censorship, trying to tell me what I can and can't talk about. And the third and probably biggest thing is I don't like talking to women who try to act, the classic, I'm not like that, or the most of my gender is not like that. That irritates me.
Would that be classified as a wholesome pretender?
There you go. You see, you familiar with my terminology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites. I don't, I don't like that. If a woman's going to interview me, I want her to be just as real and authentic with me as I'm being with her. Now, that's not to say that, I don't know. Let's say I was talking about having threesomes and group sex, and you said, one of you 2 ladies said, oh, well, that's something I've never done before. More than likely, I'm going to take you on face value. So I'm not going to be prone to challenge that if you speak solely for yourself. But if you were to say something like, well, what kind of women you dealing with? Because I don't know any women in my life who ever had a 9-to-12 threesome. Only some kind of skanky woman who used to do porno movies would do. See, that's the type of shit I'm like, okay, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You're lying.
Yeah, I think I had kind of got I got a first pill of honesty very early. But I can remember when I used to go to church real heavy, there was this chick I used to go to church with, and she sang the choir. She led the youth choir, little events, whatever. And we ended up hanging out. Man, totally what I was not expecting. Like, she was a freak hoe, not like a regular hoe, but like a freak hoe. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, here's the thing. And I think most people know this already, but from my experience, some of your biggest freaks are women that are religious, go to church every Sunday. Like to highlight a quick seduction story. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, I was in McDonald's on a Sunday and met this sister and started being more one with her. And I was talking major shit, talking about how I was going to bend over and fuck her doggy style, make her come on my dick. And she was like, "You so bad. I can't believe you talking like this on my way to church." And I said, "Oh, really? You on your way to church?" And she said, "Yeah, actually, I'm a Sunday school teacher." And, at first she lightheartedly was like, "You shouldn't be talking to me that way because I'm a good girl and I go to church." And let's just say we all know what happened later.
What, y'all had Bible study? I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we had study. We had intense study. It was some intensive study period in there. And there was a lot of, oh my God, and that type of thing going on. So yeah. So women, what I always do whenever I interact with a woman is I like to challenge women's boundaries. In other words, let's say there was a freak scale from 1 to 10. Now there's some women who might be an 8, 9, or 10 level of freakiness, and they know that. And once they get comfortable with you, they will acknowledge that. But then there's other women who've never had their boundaries challenged. So they might think, figuratively speaking, that they're a 5 or a 6. But then I will work on their minds and use the magic of my verbal seduction to push them to experiment at a 7, 8, 9, or 10 level. And they'll basically be like, more or less like, "Damn, I didn't even know I had it in me to be that freaky." Like, for a simple example would be, I was just talking about group sex a few minutes ago. I've had some women that I met that they said, "Oh, I would never engage in a menage a trois. I would never do that." And I would be like, "Are you sure?" They'd be like, "No, it's just not in me to do that." And I would give them this look like, "Really?" And without getting a lot of details, sure enough, with some women, it might be as quickly as a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. Other women, it might be 3 or 4 months later. But I would end up having that same woman who said, "It's not in me to indulge in a menage a trois and indulge in a menage a trois." So some women, and I would say to a lesser extent, some men might be like that. There's some men who might not know what their boundaries are. They might think their boundaries are, say, at a 7 level when their boundaries are actually at a 10 level. They've never had anybody tempt them. Somebody has to be that person who tempts you. With a woman, they call that a temptress. And so like you'll have men who say, "Oh, I'm in love with my wife. I will never cheat on my wife." And that's because they ran across a woman who was able to tempt them to cheat on their wife. So a lot of women, they don't know their own boundaries, but some women do. And I understand one of the reasons why I started this adults only podcast program I have called the Erotic Conversationalist. And I haven't done an episode of that in a long time. But one of the things that played into me starting that was that I had a number of conversations with women where they would essentially tell me, "Alan, you men are lucky." And I would say, "What do you mean?" And after a while, I knew where they were going with this. They were basically saying so many words like, "See, society gives men a pass to go out and sow their wild oats and be adventurous and experimental sexually. But us women, most factions of society puts pressure on us to maintain the proverbial good girl image and good girl, social reputation. And sometimes that can become taxing. The minute you try to be sexually liberated, what do you call? Called a whore. He called a slut. So I wanted to have conversations about this, and that's one of the things that played in to my show, The Erotic Conversations. If you were to listen to the episodes, like definitely probably 2/3, 3/4 of them or more, have that somewhere in the conversation, that discussion about how has it affected you as a woman, the pressure of always trying to be the proverbial innocent, wholesome, prudish, monogamy-oriented good girl.
Okay, so where does this podcast air? Is it on YouTube?
No, it's if you go to my website, it's directapproachdating.com, which is my main website, and then /podcast. Direct Approach Dating. I'll put it in the
if someone can put it in the chat for us, I would greatly appreciate that. I do have another question for you, Alan.
Sure.
Can you, for those of our listening audience who don't know what mode 1 is, can you give us just a quick synopsis as to what mode 1 is? And my follow-up to that would be, is mode 1 something that would work for women?
Mode 1, I came up with that when I was in my 20s. Well, here's the interesting thing. I start exhibiting mode 1 behavior before I actually gave it that specific name. So you can say I was being mode 1 before I actually start calling it mode 1. I started being mode 1 when I was 21. I was a student at Indiana University of Bloomington, Indiana. And to give my quick 2 to 3 minute backstory, it started of all things with a porno movie. I was watching this porno movie the summer before my freshman year in college called Talk Dirty to Me with this popular white porn actor named John Leslie. And in the movie, without getting too lengthy, you could say he was basically mode 1, or what I would actually call mode 1 hardcore. He would approach women, and within the first 3 to 5 minutes of the conversation, he would essentially let them know he was trying to fuck. And when I saw that, I was like 18. This was like summer of 1981. I was blown away by that shit. Because not only had I never seen a guy do that in real life, but even in movie form, I had never seen a guy do that. So I was like, what the fuck? This dude just went straight for the jugular and shit. And at the time, my older brother, his name is Steven, he kind of laughed at me, basically like, man, this is a porno movie, man. Come on, man. Don't be taking no mental notes and don't even think about doing this in real life because you'll get slapped, you'll get cursed out. This is a porn movie. I want you to keep that in mind. This would, he literally said, this would never ever work in real life.
It's very taboo.
Yeah, at the time he said, bro, this would never work. You would never be able to get away with that in real life. And I did. I took heed to his advice at the time. So for the first, you'd say roughly 3 years of my college years, I never was. Until I think Sister George has a copy of my book, Who Said Again. Mm-hmm. My turning point is described in that book. I have, in the part 2 of Who Said Again, I have 6 verbal seduction stories. In verbal seduction story number 1, which happened in August of 1984, when I was 21 years old, that was my first major turning point. And then from there, I told my frat brothers, I'm a fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi, and just about all of them were about getting women in bed by lying to them. What's known these days as indirect pump and dump game. That's what most of my frat brothers were doing, is indirect pump and dump game. And I basically was one of the few frat brothers that was willing to challenge that. I was like, basically, why you guys do that shit? And they was like, because you got to. What other choice do you have? I said, how come you don't just straightforwardly tell these women you want to fuck them casually? And a lot of my frat brothers honestly laughed at me. They was like, man, you can't just go up to no woman you don't know ain't never talked to before and just straight up tell her all you want to do is fuck her cash, man, you gonna get slapped, you gonna get cursed out. Well, without getting into a long story, I said I disagree with that, and I did it. And to my pleasant surprise and their shock, I got way more favorable reactions to it than I did negative reactions to it. Then a lot of guys, my friends who were first criticizing me, went 180 degrees the opposite and start playing me up. Like they would tell other guys about me. It was like, hey man, y'all got to hang out with. They used to call me AC. That was my nickname among my frat brothers. They was like, man, y'all need to hang out with AC, dude. AC is hands down the most verbally bold, sexually straightforward motherfucker on this campus, man. He will walk up to a woman and tell her straight up that he want to slide his dick in her mouth, man. I ain't never seen no shit like it. And these women will be giggling and shit. And so I gained this reputation. And then what happened was my brother, again, now you go back to what I told you my brother's reaction when I watched that porn movie.
Mm-hmm.
My brother transferred down to Bloomington. He was at another campus. And a lot of my frat brothers were starting to come up to him. They said, hey, man, so you AC's brother? Man, your brother tripped, man. And my brother was like, what you talking about? He's like, oh, man, surely you know about how your brother is, man. That nigga just straight to the point, man. I mean, he don't mince no words at all, man. He'll meet a woman at 8 o'clock and by 8:02, 8:03, he talking about fucking a doggy style. My brother was like, my brother? Are you serious? So he came to me like, so that movie you watched that time, Talk Dirty to Me, you started to use that shit in real life? I said, yep. And he said, and you getting positive results from it? I said, yep. And then he witnessed it. One day we went to this 24-hour grocery store of all places. It was like about 1:30 in the morning. And I got this chick I met in the grocery store that night to take me to her car, and she sucked my dick. And my brother witnessed it. And that's when he was on board. He was like, oh, man, dude. He said, man, if you're getting results like this, he like, dude, you need to put this on paper. You need to put this on paper. And I didn't put it on paper immediately, but a few years later, I started thinking about all the behavior, both that I exhibited towards women and that other men I knew exhibited towards women, particularly with the objective of getting women in bed. And it came down to basically 4 general categories. So at first I started putting them all in these different categories. I called it category 1 initially. I would say, okay, this behavior falls into category 1. This behavior falls into category 2.
I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know, do you think the majority of men should go through a certain phase? Because you talked about sleeping with married women. You've talked about, sleeping with all kinds of different women. And what stuck out to me was the married women part, because you really got a chance to see women in a certain nature. And so I was wondering, did you think that a lot of men should go through that type of experience so that they can better understand women's nature? What do you think about
Well, that's an interesting question, Sister George. It's kind of a tricky question, actually, because I would never want to encourage men to go out and have sex with married women. But I would say if they do,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it would probably benefit them to one degree or another. I mean, because under the category of sexual duplicity, meaning women,
Right,
acting one way in public and another way privately and so on. Yeah, it was eye-opening for me. Here's what was interesting. Well, there was a few things I learned, but probably one of the biggest, I'm going to give your gender credit. Women, to me, are much more savvy, calculated cheaters than men are as a group.
right.
Like women, based on what I experienced and what I observed, women could cheat on a man in a way that 98, 99% chance their husband, fiance, or boyfriend would never find out. Whereas men, you probably have a small percentage of men in that category, But from my observation, most men are sloppy cheaters. They almost always end up getting caught. But women, man,
I agree with
they
that.
know how to cheat. Like I've had women do some smooth shit. I'll give you an example. Let's say a woman might be with her husband. Oh, I hear one of my stories. I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times on YouTube. I mentioned it again. Here's one of the boldest. And I mentioned in an article I wrote for the Negro Manosphere. You know what a slick thing some women will do? There's an adage that goes, the best way to hide something is in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
I've had women, at least probably 1/4 to 1/3 of the women that I had sex with who had a husband, fiance, or boyfriend at the time, those women introduced me to their husbands, fiancés, and boyfriends.
Wow.
They would say, this is my friend Alan. We used to go to college together. And, the guy would be like, hey, get to meet you, Alan. But yeah, I had one woman. I was at her house. She invited me over for dinner, and her husband was cool with it. He said, yeah, I'll cook. And a woman took me down to her basement. She told her husband, I want to show Alan something. And he was like, yeah, sure. And he was, upstairs cooking dinner. And all of a sudden, she went right for my crotch. She started trying to zip my pants. And here I was actually the one trying to stop it. I was basically like, what you doing?
Sheesh.
And she was like, what do you mean, what am I doing? She said, I want you. I want you in my mouth. I said, but your husband's upstairs. And she was basically like, I don't give a fuck.
That's scary.
Yeah, literally. She was like, I don't give a fuck. And yeah, she started sucking my dick in the basement while her husband was upstairs cooking dinner.
I have a question in reference to that. First of all, I think that's very scary. It's like playing with fire.
It's more than playing with fire.
Oh my gosh. But I want to know, do you think, and I like I said, I actually read Mode 1 and Ooh Say It Again. I read both I listened to the audiobook. So both books, very, very interesting, good work. But I want to know if you think that, what type of feedback you get from women, being that you're exposing the true nature of women, and a lot of women, don't like that because they want women to be seen in a positive light.
Well, what's interesting? I kind of get a mixed reaction from women because I'll categorize in terms of my different books. Ooh Say It Again is my book that exposes women's true sexually duplicitous nature. And then The Possibility of Sex is my book that exposes women's true manipulative and materialistic nature. Now, as far as Ooh Say It Again, I never really got, honestly, any real negative feedback from women. If they criticized me, it was always lighthearted. Like, oh, Alan, why'd you have to call us out that we got a kinky, freaky side? Why'd you have to do that? But it would always be lighthearted. But actually, that's the number one of my 4 audiobooks. That's my best-selling audiobook based on feedback anyway, from women. A lot of women actually play with their pussies listening to those. I'm just keeping it real. They do. A lot of women masturbate to Ooh Say It Again. Now, Concrete Rose, what's gonna make you laugh more? Man, I've had men write me and admit that shit. And that
wow.
Guys will write me there. They'll say, guys, whenever they want to say certain things, they'll preface by saying no homo. Yeah. And guys will write me and say, hey man, Alan, man, I just picked up your Ooh Say It Again audiobook. Man, that's a really good book. Hey man, check this out, man. No homo, man, but man, verbal seduction stories, man, that shit got my dick hard, man. I like start jacking off to them verbal seduction stories you got in there, man.
You know what? I know that, and I know you say something about, and I think it was in Ooh Say It Again. You talk about women and they do this nervous laughter when something is said that makes them uncomfortable. And I thought about that when I was laughing. However, I do want to know, like you kind of seem to be a proponent of, I guess, self-pleasure, because I know in the video you did, was it on Boris Kojo? You were kind of advocating for women doing that, I guess, in the presence of their partner or their man?
Well, I don't know if I would say I was advocating for it, but I just stated a fact that I have what I was talking about in that video, because a lot of people were saying Nicole Ari Parker was disrespectful to Boris. And at first I made the argument, I said, actually, I don't think her comments were all that disrespectful. And then I segued into saying, well, shit, under the category of disrespect, I said that I must have contributed to a lot of women disrespecting their husbands, fiancés, and boyfriends, because I've had situations like on my blog talk radio show and on the Erotic Conversationalist where I had women playing with their pussies with not only their husband in the house, but in the same room. There's been at least 7, 8, 9 times I've had that happen where I've had a woman playing with her pussy
while she's listening.
Was like, I give you one quick story. Well, this wasn't on air, so this story a little different because this wasn't on air. But I have had it happen a lot of times on air. But one time, this woman called into my show on Blog Talk Radio, and she was like, just gassing me up. She was like, Alan, I love your show. I love listening to you. And then I kind of lightheartedly said, I said, you love listening to my show because I get your pussy wet, don't I? And she giggled. She said, you're so bad. I said, no, tell me the truth. She said, yeah, you do. You do. I said, say it again. She said, you get my pussy real wet. I said, say it again. She said, you get my pussy real wet. So if you've ever been on Blog Talk Radio, you know, when people call in, you can see their number. Now, usually 99% of the time, if I called somebody, I would let them know that, hey, I have your number. Is it okay for me to call you? And they would either say yay or nay. This one, I decided to be bold. I wrote down her number, and then as soon as the show ended, I called her. And I said, I want to hear you play with your pussy. And she started whispering. She said, no, I can't. I said, why can't you? She said, well, for starters, my husband is right here. And I think she thought I was going to say, oh, okay, my bad. I'll hang up. But I'm a bold motherfucker. So I said, okay, put him on the phone. And she said, are you serious? I said, put him on the phone. Then she hesitated. Then she put him on the phone. He's like, what's up? I said, you know who this is?
Wow.
And he started laughing. He said, I think I do. Is this that guy who hosts that show on Blog Talk Radio that my wife was just listening to? I said, yeah, man, it's Alan Roger Currie, man. I don't like to mince words or be full of shit, so I'm going to just get to the point, man. I got your wife's pussy wet tonight. I know that, and she told me that. And
oh my God.
He started laughing. Now, he could have got angry, like some brothers might get angry, but he actually laughed. He started laughing real loud. And he said, I heard you was a trip. I heard you was a trip, but I didn't know you was this much of a trip. I said, yeah, bro, your wife's pussy is dripping wet, and here's what I want to do. I want to hear her play with her pussy, but I'm going to have her do it in a manner that's going to benefit you. I'm going to get her pussy dripping wet, and then when I get her at her highest point, I'm going to exit off the phone. Then I want you to fuck her like she stole money from you. You game? And then he laughed again. He said, hey, man, fuck it, man. I'm all for new things. Fuck it. He said, it seems like you got that type of influence over my wife already anyway. I said, yeah, I do. So sure enough, I made her play with her pussy. He was right there.
So,
oh, wow.
And right before I was about to make her come, I said, go get his pussy to your husband. Let him fuck the shit out of you. I'm out. And then I just hung up the phone.
So what I wanted to ask you, would you have considered that man? Well, let's just kind of get into this. I noticed that you are, would you consider yourself a dominant? You're
understatement.
Okay. For everybody who doesn't know, dominant is part of the BDSM community. And so you have two subsections or two sections. I don't know.
I'll tell it real quick and then I'll let you ask the question. Yeah, there's 4 sexual personalities in the world of BDSM. There's what's known as a BDSM dominant, or also known as a top. Then on the exact opposite end, there's a BDSM submissive or a BDSM bottom. Both of those two are always that way, regardless of partner. So if you're a BDSM dominant, you're always the erotically dominant partner. If you're a BDSM submissive, you're always a submissive partner. Then there's 2 in the middle that kind of go both ways. One is a switch and one is a flexible, or what's also known as a versatile. A switch would be, I'm going to use you ladies as examples. If Sister George, say, had two lovers, and let's call one Michael and one Joe. If with Joe you were always submissive, but with Michael you were always dominant, that would make you a switch. When you're a switch, you're always one way with one partner, but you're always a different way with a different partner. Whereas if Concrete Rose was in a relationship with a guy named David, and like 2/3 of the time David dominated her, but 1/3 time she dominated him, that would make both of them what's known as a flexible or versatile. That means they both go both ways. They both sometimes dominant, sometimes submissive with each other. So those are your 4 personalities.
Okay. Would you consider, like in your opinion, and it's just your opinion, would you consider most men subs these days?
There's a lot of men who are subs. A lot of men who are subs. A lot of them probably won't come out publicly and admit it, but there's a lot of men who are subs, or if not subs, flexibles or switches. Like I remember my last 9-to-5 job, I used to work at a university. I was the head of a mentoring program. And it shows you can't judge a book by its cover. I had this one mentee. He was a non-traditional student, meaning he was older. He wasn't like traditional college age. He was like in his early to mid 30s. Now, if I showed you a picture of this brother, you would never think he was I mean, he looked like he used to play college football. He was buff. He looked very masculine. Had a beard, just looked masculine, had a deep resonant voice. But one day we got to talking about BDSM, and he said, Mr. Currie, I'm going to tell you something that's probably going to blow you away. I said, what's that? He said, with the women I deal with, he said, I'm actually a sub. And I kind of laughed. I was basically like, get the fuck out of here. He said, no, I'm very serious. He said, I don't get anything out of dominating women. He said, that doesn't arouse me. He said, I love for a woman to treat me like I'm her bitch. And I said, you look like you're serious. He said, I'm very serious. He said, that's what gets me off. He said, sex is all about what gets you off. He said, I get off on my girlfriends treating me like I'm their bitch. And I was like, wow. And me and a few other guys over the conversation, we just was like, wow. Because most women and men would have the stereotype that if a guy is going to be a sub, that he looks like he's kind of effeminate, or just looks like he's soft, kind of wimpy looking or some of that nature. But again, this brother physically was built like a college football linebacker. His voice was totally masculine, had the beard, shaven head, but he was like, I like for women to treat me like a bitch. And I was like, hey, man, whatever floats your boat. One other time along those same lines, I remember a few years ago, there was this woman I used to deal with, and we were talking about it, and I made the same wrong assumption. I was saying how I think the only men who will be subs are guys, basically who are guys who are kind of semi-feminine or wimpy. And this woman I was talking to at the time, she said, no, that's not true. And then she named some guys that she had already told me about. So she said, you remember that guy I told you about named Ralph? I said, yeah, I remember Ralph. She said, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and send you a picture of Ralph. So she sent me a picture of Ralph through email. And again, this guy, he was a really masculine looking dude. Looked like he could whoop a lot of dudes' ass. She said, I'm about to call him on 3-way. Put your phone on mute, and I'm going to show you how I dominate him. Sure enough, she called him. He had this like deep voice. He's like, yeah, what's up, baby? And she was like, no, don't call me baby. Call me mama. Say hello, mama. He was like, hello, mama. She was like, you still my bitch, aren't you? He was like, of course, mama, I'm your bitch. She was like, I just wanted to call and make sure you still my bitch. You'll do anything for me, won't you? You'll do anything for mama. He was like, yeah, I'll do anything for you, mama, because I'm your bitch. And then they ended the conversation. She was like, see, Alan, told you. Don't be judging men by how they look physically.
Wow.
What's
We
the difference between a sub and a simp?
A simp, well, you can say, I'll say this. Simps, they're similar, but at the same time different. Now, speaking of that word, I'm glad you brought that word up. Because I'm going to tell you something. If there's one thing that irritates me about a lot of young brothers on YouTube, is how they've distorted that term. Because, like, you got some young brothers on YouTube, they'll call a guy who's a prolific womanizer a simp, which is ridiculous. That's pretty much like an oxymoron. You can't be a prolific womanizer and be a fucking simp. A simp, here's the two legitimate definitions of a simp. A simp is either a guy who spends a lot of time with women in a non-physical, non-sexual way, and or spends a lot of money on women, but he ain't getting no pussy. That's the number one legitimate definition of a simp, is when you're spending a lot of time with a woman and spending a lot of money on a woman, but she ain't even gave you she ain't sucked your dick yet. She ain't gave you no pussy. In some case, she ain't even tongue kiss you yet. That's the first legitimate definition of a simp. Second definition of a simp, and this would relate to your question, Concrete Rose, would be a man who is married or in a long-term relationship with a woman, but it's obvious to everyone that the man's wife, fiance, or girlfriend, quote unquote, wears the pants in the marriage or relationship. She's like the dominant partner. She bosses him around all the time. She disrespects him. She verbally emasculates him, and he takes it. He tolerates it. That's the second legitimate definition of a simp. All these other definitions that are floating around on YouTube of what is a simp, if it ain't similar to those two definitions, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not a legitimate definition of a simp. It's bullshit.
Well, that leads me into my next.
Yeah.
So there has been a lot of talk around the manosphere about game and the definitions of game, what game should be used for. Can you give us a roundabout definition of what you think game is?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a very subjective term, and that's a good question, Concrete Rose. Matter of fact, both of you.
That was Danny.
Oh, that was Danny. Okay, I'm sorry. Danny, both of you ladies are full of good questions tonight, and I like that. But here's a general definition of game. Game, generally speaking, is simply anything that helps enhance your chances of getting the quality of women you want in bed and or the quantity of women you want in bed. So that's what I would call the simple general definition of game. Is anything that helps enhance your ability to get the quality of women you want in bed and or the quantity of women you want in bed. And there's two general categories of game, which would be the first two general categories is verbal and nonverbal. Verbal game and nonverbal game. Like I deal primarily with verbal game. And then within that category, there's two subcategories. There's direct verbal game and indirect verbal game. And then for nonverbal game, an example of nonverbal game would be simply like what's known as looks game or body game. Like my fellow dating advisor named Ron Wills, he does a lot of videos on body game. That would be an example of nonverbal game is body game. Even if you do a lot of tricking, the nickname for that, the nickname for tricking is money game. Money game. So yeah, there's verbal and nonverbal, and then within the verbal category, there's direct verbal game and indirect verbal game.
Okay.
I have a question. Let me ask really quick. I'm sorry, Danny, was your question related to game? Because mine is going to take it away from the topic. If so, go ahead, and then I'll ask mine.
So now that you've given your definitions of game, now we hear a lot of men in the manosphere talking about Western culture and the women from Western culture not being very submissive or feminine, and that the culture is basically ruined, right? They say when you go over to other countries, The women are more attractive, more submissive, more cooperative. They say that game isn't needed. What do you say about that?
Bullshit.
Okay.
Here's the reality. In this country, and I've talked to many women on this issue, so I know how women really feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
See, we are no longer living in a generation where you're going to have a high percentage of men that are considered what was traditionally known as the breadwinners. The breadwinners. Women work. Many of them work in some faction of corporate America. So without getting too lengthy, when you have a generation of women that have grown up working in corporate America and earning their own money and being promoted to the position of supervisor, district manager, a woman will be eaten alive if she goes in corporate America being all feminine and submissive. Mm-hmm. So she just, either intentionally or unintentionally, she just naturally is going to adopt some degree of masculine traits. Like some women I know personally that I went to high school with, college with, and know otherwise. That's one of the dilemmas for them. A lot of women will say to me, Alan, I'm having a hard time learning how to turn off my corporate America persona when I get home. So it ain't got nothing to do with geography. It has to do with a woman is always going to be more likely to be ultra feminine and ultra submissive when she's not out there in the man's working world.
I agree with that.
You know, if she is working, she's in some kind of field that's dominated by women, maybe like a nursery school teacher or something. But if a woman's working for a Fortune 500 company and she's high on the corporate ladder and you're expecting her to be Miss Feminine and Miss Submissive, you're being at minimum unrealistic, and at maximum you're being delusional. Like to bring in my fiance, for example. My fiance doesn't have a 9 to 5 job. My fiance works for me. Mm-hmm. The only man she deals with on a day-to-day basis is me.
So that helps her remain in her femininity.
There you go.
Okay. I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. What were you going to ask, Danny? Go ahead.
Well, because this is what my thing was, and just to kind of play devil's advocate, because I hear a lot of men talking about this, and then I'll hear men say, well, women in other countries have jobs, but the men still get femininity from the women. The men don't have to go out of their way. They don't have to do anything to get femininity, but just be them. And so when they talk about Western culture, they say you got to play these games, you got to be this person, or you have to spit this way, or you have to trick, or you have to do this, that, and the third. When they say they go to other countries, they say these things come naturally, and it's not a problem.
It's bullshit. See, here's one of the benefits of being an internationally renowned dating coach. I'm well known in every major country of the world. I have clients from every major country in the world. If what you're saying you heard was true, then I wouldn't have the male clients that I have from all these major countries telling me about the challenges they have with women. I have men, for example, from the United Kingdom that express the same challenges with women that men here in the United States do. I have men from Germany that express the same challenges with women that men here in the United States do. I have men from China, Japan, Australia, Mexico, Canada. The list goes on. So I know as a dating coach for over 20 years that what a lot of these men are saying on YouTube is bullshit. See, here's what a lot of men are conflating. You got a lot of men who say might take a trip to the Dominican Republic or take a trip to Rio de Janeiro, and they pull out those US dollars, and those women act feminine and submissive, and they'll say, hey, all Brazilian women are more feminine and submissive, or all women in the Dominican Republic are more feminine. No, they're not. They're submissive to the US dollar. They ain't submissive.
Yep.
They submissive to the money. See, here's where men need to keep shit real and quit being delusional. There's a lot of women that will. There's a difference between a woman being genuinely submissive and a woman putting on a submissive performance. Big difference. And without getting too lengthy, anytime you promote yourself as Mr. Big Dollars, you know, Mr. Sugar Daddy, you're going to get a lot of women to put on a submissive performance for you. You want to know the true test of if a woman is truly submitted to you? Is when you broke, unemployed, you ain't spending no money on a woman, and that woman's still submissive to you. Like I've had to somewhat toot my horn. I've had instances of my life where I give one example. When I lived in Los Angeles one time, I had this woman who was a very wealthy doctor, lived in Beverly Hills. I never spent $5 on her. Everything to do with money, she was the one spending money on me. But yet she was very submissive to me. I dominated the shit out of her. I fucked her and her sister.
Wow. I do have a question for you since we're talking about this topic specifically. What are your thoughts on Black love? I mean, anybody who listens to our channel knows that, I'm an advocate for it. I do know that I've heard you on different panels, and I think that you're an equal opportunist, but I do want to know what your direct thoughts are on Black love.
Before you answer that, let me send a very special shout out to Sasha Malone for the Cash App. Thank you so much.
I mean, I don't know if I understand my thoughts on Black love.
Yeah, first of all, do you believe
in it? Is it possible or impossible, or what do you mean?
Well, do you believe in it? Do you think that it's beneficial? Is it something that you aspire to have? Do you think, not see a benefit in it?
Concrete Rose, this is going to be my first criticism of you. You asking me, do I believe in Black love? But I'm engaged to be married to a sister.
Right. Absolutely. But I didn't know if you're an equal opportunist and it just so happened that, that's the person who you fell in love with. But if it was, Karen or Becky, whomever, it would have been just as.
Women? What's your preference, Black women?
Oh, for long-term relationships, always. Matter of fact,
okay.
I've only dated for long-term, like, emotionally profound type relationships. My relationships have only been with Black women. Now, casual sex is where I've been all over. I've fucked at least a handful of women from pretty much every race and ethnicity on earth for casual sex. But for long-term, boyfriend, girlfriend type relationships, all my relationships have been with sisters.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. I think that answers my question. I have one final question for you, though. This is off topic, and I just want to know. I know that you've had like some beef with Obsidian, and there was a tiff between you and O'Shea, and I just want to know if there is a specific reason why you feel that you've had so much beef with guys within the manosphere. Where do you think that's coming from, or what's drawing the tension between you and some of the men in the manosphere?
Well, part of it is related to that question you just asked me. See, there's a lot of brothers on YouTube that have a passionate dislike for sisters. Or if it's not a genuine passionate dislike for sisters, at minimum, they attract a lot of views to their videos, a lot of subscribers to their channel, and a lot of Patreon subscribers talking about the animosity between Black men and Black women. So let's go with the second option. If you're a guy that attracts a lot of views talking about how Black men and Black women don't get along and how they'll never make it in a marriage, are you ever going to be friendly towards a guy who says that that's bullshit?
Good point.
That's messing with your money. Because so some of these guys, if only from a business end, they're never going to co-sign what the idea that Black men and Black women can get along and live happily ever after, because that's going to fuck with their money. People are not going to pay much attention to their views. They're not, give them the views and give them the subscribers and all that. So some of it is contrived. some of these guys, there's one category of guys, I think behind the scenes, they don't really have a dislike for sisters, but they pretend to be publicly in order to attract more people to their channel. Like there's a lot of brothers who do nothing but dog our sisters, but they're in a relationship with a sister. Make that make sense.
Facts.
I don't that to me, that lets you know right there they full of shit. And then for the guys who do have a passionate disdain for sisters, they ain't gonna never like a brother like me because I've never had a disdain towards sisters ever.
Well, your experience is different.
Yeah, and that's
because
they don't like to hear that.
A lot of the men, you know, they can't, you know, they've struggled. They like admittedly said they couldn't get a date. Women would look right past them, wouldn't give them the time of day, you know. So,
well, but this is another thing that I was curious about. People say men like Alan Roger Currie have kind of ruined the dating game because of the games and the things that that they're able to do that a lot of other men aren't able to do. What do you think about that, ARC?
That I've ruined the game?
Well, if you have women that are easily seduced and they're sleeping with the same men that's able to do these things, right? And then you have of men who aren't able to do these things but are looking for women to settle down with, but these women that they want to settle down with have been kind of ran through by the guys with swag game, what have you. They're saying that pickup artists, dating coaches have kind of ruined the game. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I can't. Well, number one, I can't agree with that. I mean, I didn't ruin. Now, I've had guys tell me I've personally ruined some things in another aspect that's different from what you just described. But as far, here's just the reality, and I'm sure you ladies by now, since you guys keep up with the manosphere, you're familiar with what's known as the 80-20 rule theory. Or no?
I do.
Yes, I'm familiar. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, the essence of that is that, and see, a lot of guys use that, they distort it and misinterpret it. Really, that has more to do with casual sex than long-term relationships. A lot of guys think it has to do with both, but it has much more to do with casual sex. Without getting too lengthy, too academic, what it essentially asserts, that rule theory asserts, is that there's only about 20% of men in society that will be able to engage in casual sex with a number of women without spending time with those women significantly, not in a non-sexual way, and without spending any money on them. Most men in society, if they engage in casual sex, they're going to have to spend money on them, i.e. be a trick or a sugar daddy. They're going to have to spend a lot of time with the woman non-sexually, you know, and whatever else. And see, men are very egotistical, very territorial, and very jealous in this area. And in simple terms, here's how men are. Let's say I went to college with two women named Lisa and Tiffany, and I fucked both Lisa and Tiffany casually. And each of them leave college and they get engaged to two guys. And those guys might be really into to Lisa and Tiffany until they find out that I fucked both of those women without being their boyfriend. Most of them guys, them two guys, more than likely, them two guys gonna have a reaction to that. They're gonna be like, oh, I ain't gonna marry you now. And the women be like, why not? Because you fucked that nigga Alan Roger Currie. And he wasn't even your boyfriend. You fucked that nigga. Why you fuck that nigga? You fucked him. So I ain't gonna, because see, guys, this is how guys think. Guys have a thing where I'll just simply say, if they knew that I was there, if I was both of those women ex-boyfriend, that's not gonna bother them as much. Why? Because I put in the same investment of time non-sexually as they did. I probably spent the same amount of money on these women that they have up to this point. But here's where men get really jealous and really envious and really hateful, is if, say, they spend a lot of time with Lisa or Linda, Tiffany, whoever, non-sexually, taking her out on dates and stuff, treating her to meals, and then they find out a brother like me, all I did was talk shit in their ear and I got my dick sucked and was able to fuck them. They not gonna like me. They gonna resent me as well as the woman who they were in a relationship or almost in a relationship with. They're gonna resent her. They're gonna call her a hoe. They're gonna be like, oh, bitch, I thought you was a good girl. You a hoe. And she gonna be like, why am I a hoe? Because you fucked that nigga Alan Roger Currie. He didn't even take you out on a one dinner date. He didn't spend $10 on your ass. I done spent like $500 on your ass. But you fucked this nigga for free? So, yeah, going back to that original question, mess up game, that's why you got a lot of animosity. Like, people think on YouTube it's just animosity between men and women, but there's really a high, as much, if not sometimes more, animosity between men and men. Because a lot of men, they don't like knowing about a brother like me being able to fuck women quicker than they did, less expensively than they did, without spending time with that woman non-sexually like they had to. They don't like that. So they hate on a brother like me. They be like, oh, man, fuck that nigga, man. That old fuck boy, motherfucker, man, fuck that nigga. That's where that comes from, because they know, and that was before the internet. I remember when I was like, when I was younger, like say in college or in my 20s, even before the advent of the internet, guys was like that. Guys, that's just general nature of a lot of guys. There's exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, guys hate when they hear that another guy was able to get, for them, what they could only get pussy from that woman, being that woman's boyfriend, fiance, or husband. They don't like knowing that that woman gave her pussy to another guy as just a fuck buddy. They don't like that.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Shout out to Doug for the Cash App. Thank you so much, Doug.
We wanted to know if you have a little bit of time so we can open it up for a few questions from ladies only. If you have time, Alan.
Oh, yeah. I say minimum. I got another 40 minutes to rock with you guys, if not a little bit longer.
Okay. So, yeah.
Link.
And we're just asking for the ladies to come up. Ladies only. Questions from ladies only. So if any of the ladies in the chat have questions, feel free to come up and join us. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Concrete, because it was something else that I wanted to ask him. I'm looking through the notes, honey.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing in mine. And I had a question. I can't remember what it was about. I think it was about the Madonna whore complex, but I can't find it in my notes. And I'm kind of out of order now.
Well, it's funny you would bring that up, though. That relates to almost everything I was just saying in my last commentary. Is the Madonna whore complex.
That's what made me think of it.
Yeah, Sigmund Freud, for those in the chat room who might be ignorant, I think most people are generally familiar, but there might be some people in the chat room. But in the 19th century, there's a legendary psychologist named Dr. Sigmund Freud. And one of his theories and assertions was the Madonna whore complex. And he basically asserted that that was always going to one degree or another, negatively affect the way men interact with women sexually. Because what he basically proposed is that he said the first woman that a man admires and respects, with the exception of if he had some kind of dysfunctional relationship with his mother, is his mother. Because you typically live with your mother for 16, 17, 18 years minimum. And he basically said for just about all men, a man's mother, or in some cases say their stepmother, that's their first standard. Their standard for how they judge all other women is their mother. And again, it could be exceptions in certain cases. It could be a stepmother, an aunt, a grandmother, whatever. But let's just say generally your mother. And what he basically went on to say is that most men look, until they get jolted by some kind of incident or something, most men look at their mother as the ultimate good girl, the ultimate good girl. They don't even like to think about their biological fathers having sex with their mother, because most men's mother is the ultimate good girl. So with their mother, they fall in love with all her non-sexual attributes. But then when they get older and start having sexual desires, what they'll say in a matter of speaking is, I want my wife to be just like my mother. I want her to represent the best qualities of my mother. But obviously, I don't want to fuck my mother. So for sexual purposes, I got to find some other woman who's almost the antithesis of my mother. Basically, just a down and dirty slut. So he proposed, Sigmund Freud, that this is why most men, a lot of married men have, say, a mistress or a side piece. Is because in a nutshell, they want their girlfriend, fiance, or wife to be their personal good girl.
Yes.
They want her to be the good girl in their life. And then they want a woman on the side to be their kinky slut, kinky freak in their life.
You know, and I've asked a lot of men questions, especially men that I know that are kind of like known cheaters. Are there things that you would do with your wife that you wouldn't do with, or things that you wouldn't do with your wife that you would do with another woman? Quite a few men said yes. And I thought
I would expect that.
Crazy.
I would expect that.
It was so weird to me because I'm saying, and I would say that I probably asked these types of questions about 5 years ago. I just thought that was so crazy. Someone like you're married. Right?
Yeah, I have some friends and frat brothers who have opened up to me over the years. They'll say that. They'll say, let's say I might have a friend or frat brother that is married, but he regularly or semi-regularly cheats on his wife. And sometimes I'll ask them some pointed, straightforward questions. Basically, I'll be like, dude, why you got all these side pieces, man? And one first thing they'll say, cuz, man, that's how I get my freak on. That's how I get my freak on. And I'll be like, well, what about you with your wife? And they'll start frowning. They'll be like, nah, bro. Nah, I'll be like, what do you mean? They'll be like, nah, man, I can't be real freaky with my wife, man. That's my wife, man. That's the mother to my children, man. I can't be that way with my wife, man. Like,